Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm hanging in. I was going to record this hours ago, but it was my aunt's birthday and I haven't spoken to my aunt in months because we see things politically in two separate spectrums. She had no idea about my job loss. I kind of dug a little bit in there for her to understand what injustices have been occurring here in New York. Yeah, fun times. But we all have those family members who would rather not talk to somebody, being that my mother and her were sisters. And she promised my mother she would watch out after me. She is my godmother. But sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes when you put, you want to be a good person and put things in situations where it only applies to you in a selfish way. Oops, but it affected my niece. Holy shit. Well, now I got to think about it. It's all right. I love her anyway. And, unfortunately, when things start coming out even more, with no judgment, I'm going to be there for her and I'm going to explain it all. And that's one of my jobs, one of my missions. So yeah, I was on the phone for a long time and I know that Sunday, a lot of people like to depress and chillax and catch up on things. I hope everybody's been catching up. I do put a lot of stuff out there. Some people breeze through it, others don't. It's okay. I want to welcome all the new subscribers. Hi. Thank you so much for subscribing. It means a lot to me. I'm taking you on my journey. So I have a new book. I actually have a physical book this time. I'm also debating on another book. It's a PDF. It's like the Book of Enoch, which is super old. Someone scanned it. So it's not the easiest read because of the way it was scanned in. So there's another book that I might tackle too, but it's really good. And again, I want to get this stuff out before, I still haven't heard from my accountant yet on what to do, what avenue I should go down. I don't know how much I'm getting back in taxes, probably little to next to nothing, but a little next to nothing is more than something that I have in my pocket right now. So I'm waiting on all that stuff and being patient. Because of what the cover is, I'm going to show it, but not say it. It's the gospel of the 17th letter of the alphabet, or Quelle, which means source. Okay. Now we know why I can't say that. Associated with things that have nothing to do with those things. So just like my other readings, I'm going to kind of read the introduction and possibly go up to chapter 2. Just like other reads, this is a short little, you see it's short, but to break it up so that people can absorb the information, I'm going to do it that way, make it easier. I've had this book for a while. I dug into it a little bit, but when I get the message, I have to do. So we're going to start off with the introduction. And hopefully I can read properly this time. The Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, the opening books of the canonical New Testament, have long been Christians' primary source of knowledge about Jesus and his teachings. But these were not the only Gospels written in the decades and centuries following Jesus. Within the last 100 years, archaeologists and biblical scholars have discovered and studied many others. Some of those texts have been known only by name. Others had been entirely lost to history until just recently. In 1896, a German scholar purchased an ancient Egyptian manuscript from the antiquities dealer in Cairo. As it turned out, the manuscript included the Gospel of Mary, a 5th century translation of an earlier Greek text. In the years that followed, 2 3rd century Greek fragments of Mary also came to light. The next year, in 1897, Greek fragments of another unknown gospel were first published. It wasn't until 1945 that a complete copy was discovered in Egypt. The text turned out to be the long-lost Gospel of Thomas. It was discovered alongside other previously unknown books, including the Gospel of Philip. Excuse me, guys. Even more recently, sometime in the 1970s, the exact date is unknown, another gospel was discovered in Egypt, although it wasn't restored and published until 2006. And additional fragments were recovered in 2010. This ancient text turned out to be another one known to have once existed, the controversial Gospel of Judas. The rapidly increasing number of ancient Gospels available for study has expanded our appreciation of the spiritual breadth and diversity of the many early communities committed to following Jesus. At the same time, in their meticulous study of the canonical Gospels, scholars also reconstructed the earliest of them all, the Gospel of Quelle. 17th letter of the alphabet comes from the German word Quelle, meaning source. Specifically, the term 17th letter of the alphabet describes a shared literary source used by Matthew and Luke. Its existence was first theorized by a German scholar named Christian Weiss in 1838. The theory based on the now widely accepted fact that Mark was written before Matthew, Luke, and John, which, as we'll see, explains much about the literary relationship between the New Testament Gospels. However, it doesn't explain all the literary parallels. For its part, John doesn't overlap the others very much. Its content resembles that of Matthew, Mark, and Luke only about 8% of the time. Put differently, about 92% of John is unique to John. However, the first 3 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are often referred to collectively as the synoptics, since their contents frequently overlap, often word for word. Many of these word-for-word agreements are easily explained by the fact that the authors of Matthew and Luke copied and edited large portions of Mark. However, that leaves well over 200 parallel verses that appear in both Matthew and Luke, but not in Mark, almost all of them saying of Jesus. If we can explain most of the parallels between Matthew, Mark, and Luke by the dependence of Matthew and Luke on Mark, how can we to explain the parallels between Matthew and Luke that don't appear in Mark? The suggestion that initially emerged in the 19th century was that in addition to Mark's gospel, Matthew and Luke used another common source, now lost to us, which was comprised mainly of the list of Jesus' sayings, the hypothetical Quelle document. Prior to the discovery of Thomas, the idea of such a document was only theoretical. However, more recently discovered Gospel of Thomas appears to be exactly the sort of gospel that scholars believe Quelle, 17th letter of the alphabet, was a collection of Jesus' sayings, remnants of an oral tradition preserved by Jesus' earliest followers and passed down from one generation to the next. The discovery of Thomas' gospel then gave greater credence to the theory that the other lists of Jesus' sayings, lists like the one now known as the 17th letter of the alphabet, circulated among early followers of Jesus. As chapter 1 will describe the greater detail, the lost gospel of the 17th letter of the alphabet, reconstructed from its inclusion in Matthew and Luke, is in fact the first written gospel known to have existed. It's difficult to overstate the significance of this fact, since the reconstructed 17th letter of the alphabet is a gospel in its own right, and the earliest known one at that. It promises not only to complement our understandings of the other gospels, it promises also to add to our understanding of Jesus himself, when and where the 17th letter of the alphabet written, and what more can we learn from it? Again, 17th letter of the alphabet. So I do apologize for that, but they say it enough because of other things. My co-host would not leave the armchair. She says hi. So this is, I would assume, chapter 1, the context of Quelle. The date, province, and development of the 17th letter of the alphabet gospel has understandably been the subject of some debate, although scholars broadly agree about its general outline. Whereas Quelle, or at least some of the 17th letter of the alphabet, could have come to Matthew and Luke in the form of oral tradition, these non-Markian texts are so similar to one another in Greek that they are unlikely to have been passed down in oral form. It's even less likely that Jesus' sayings would have been translated from Aramaic into Greek using exactly the same words and passed along by word of mouth to Matthew and Luke. Consequently, Quelle must have been a written document, probably written in Greek, like the with canonical gospels, the Canaanite cannibals. Hope that makes sense. Scholars also widely agree that this Greek collection of Jesus' sayings were written sometime between 50 and 70 CE, most likely in Galilee. They recognize that Quelle, like other gospels, probably went through multiple levels of editing before reaching a final form. John S. Kloppenberg proposed now widely held theory about 3 different editorial stages in Quelle's development. Not everyone, however, remains as confident about the possibility of accurately identifying specific editorial layers in a reconstructed hypothetical document. For example, in his foundational book, The New Testament and the People of God, British scholar N.T. Wright describes the thesis in some detail and raises plausible questions about the entire enterprise. Wright argues that conclusions drawn from the theoretical stratification of this hypothetical document coincides too neatly with a specific agenda to re-envision early Christians who did not believe in things like resurrection of Christ. Christians who originally believe in wisdom without prophecy, general ethical teachings without judgment. In short, a type of Jesus moment which challenges Christianity as it has been traditionally understood and practiced. This debate over whether Quelle undermines traditional Christianity is the same debate that liberal and evangelical scholars have waged for years over Thomas' gospel. And the position about Quelle taken here is much like the moderating position described in the Gospel of Thomas, a new translation for spiritual seekers. That is, the 17th letter of the alphabet can be read in such a way as to complement and broaden our understanding of early Christianity without necessarily undermining Christian faith. True, Wright's criticism does suggest the elaborate attempts to reconstruct the evolution of a document, which itself is a reconstruction, may fail to pass the test of Occam's razor. He concludes by expressing, sympathy for a simpler expansion of the non-Markian parallels between Matthew and Luke. The theory that Luke simply used Matthew. If Luke was familiar with both Mark and Matthew, then the non-Markian overlaps between Matthew and Luke wouldn't require a hypothetical source document. Those 200 plus verses would simply reflect places where Luke departed from Mark's text and chose to use material from Matthew instead. The problem with this explanation is that in order to be pervasive, it has to account for why Luke appears to have been unaware of Matthew's editorial revisions to Mark. Though specialists continue to argue the point, the majority of scholars agree that the Quelle hypothesis is the best way to make sense of all the evidence. The middle position taken here is consistent with the scholarly consensus, but cautions about increasingly elaborate theories. Though reluctant to separate Quelle into discrete layers of developing tradition, the translation closely follows the most authoritative textual reconstruction, that of the International Quelle Project, which published the critical edition of the 17th letter of the alphabet in 2000. In addition, the conclusions drawn about the beliefs of those who read and use Quelle will tend to be more modest in scope. This caution seems warranted since the reconstruction text of Quelle remains fragmentary. Unless an actual copy of Quelle is discovered, whatever contents weren't used by both Matthew and Luke will remain unknown. Through Quelle appears to have been mainly a list of Jesus' sayings with little or no narrative context, the main exemptions being the temptation story and the story of the Roman centurion. It may have contained other stories as well. Even if it didn't, however, we may still be cautious about assuming that the people who used it didn't believe Jesus rose from the dead. In fact, we know for certain that at least 2 readers and editors of Quelle did believe in the resurrection of Jesus, the authors of Matthew and Luke. So although Quelle can and should be read as a gospel about Jesus on its own terms and its own right, we would be equally justified in remaining from overly elaborate conclusions. Again, the unique perspective of Quelle could very well be a welcome opportunity to expand and nuance our understanding of the early Jesus movement. Chapters 3 through 5 will make exactly that point. Before proposing some of those conclusions, however, it will be helpful to review Quelle as reconstructed by the most authoritative critical edition. 2 translations are included here. The more literal transition in the appendix retains chapter and verse numbers from Luke and Matthew, since the scholars believe Luke preserves the original chronology of Quelle more closely than Matthew. Most of the verses retain the numbers used in Luke. References to specific verses in Quelle then are often enumerated like 17th letter of the alphabet 636, meaning the verse has been reconstructed by comparing Luke 636 with its textual parallel to Matthew 5:48. The more literal translation in the appendix is being committed to the public domain and may be freely copied and used for any purpose. By contrast, the translation in chapter 2 is slightly more colloquial, loose translation intended to make the text accessible. It avoids technical jargon and reads more smoothly. In order to give the sense of the original text, it dispenses with chapter and verse numbers and also includes headers to help organize the text into logical sections. The very act of organizing the text in such a way is itself an act of interpretation, which is why the more exact translation in the appendix doesn't contain headers. Both translations are various strategies to mitigate masculine generic language, but the loose version occasionally takes an extra step in the direction, such as adding the word sister alongside brother in 17th letter of the alphabet 614:42 and 17th letter of the alphabet 17:3. Additionally, the translation in chapter 2 doesn't use the word father to describe God, using the more gender neutral yet descriptive term provider instead. The intent is to convey the sense of original text as much as possible while avoiding gender inclusive language. Wow. Wow. I would call source provider and not to say the father, because again, my understanding of what source creator is energy, which is having no gender. I mean, what came first, the chicken or the egg? You need both to tango to create the egg. I like that. Provider. Part 2, chapter 2, whatever you want to call it. The Gospel of the 17th letter of the alphabet, a new translation. John the Baptizer. John, the entire region around the Jordan. He told the crowds who went out to be baptized, quote, you offspring of vipers, who warned you to flee from the fury to come. So bear fruit worthy of change. Don't start to say to yourselves, we have Abraham for our ancestor, because I tell you that God is able to raise up children from Abraham from these stones. Quote, even now the axe lies at the root of the trees. So every tree that doesn't bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. I baptize you in water, but one who is greater than I will come, the thong of whose sandals I am not worthy to loosen. He'll baptize you in Holy Spirit and fire. His pitchfork is in his hand to clean out his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn. But he'll burn up the chaff with the fire that cannot be put out, end quote. Can't imagine what he's speaking about there. There's so much I want to say, but I'm going to hold off on that. But those of you who know how I think, do you see what you see it? You see it. You see it. God's Son initiated. Jesus baptized. Heaven opened and the Spirit on him, Son. So there's like little missing text there. Jesus was laid by the Spirit into the desert to be tested by. He didn't eat anything for 40 days. He was hungry. Quote, if you are God's son, end quote, the devil told him. Quote, tell these stones to turn into bread. It's written, don't live on bread alone, Jesus replied. The devil led him to Jerusalem, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said, if you're God's son, throw yourself down, because it's written, God will put angels in charge of you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you don't dash your foot against a stone. It's been said, don't test the Lord your God, Jesus replied. Then the devil took him to a high mountain and showed him all the glorious empires of the world. I'll give you all these, the devil told him, if you'll bow to me. It's written, bow to the Lord your God and serve God only, Jesus replied. Then the devil left him. Putting a pause there. In a Wasp Bay yesterday, I read a very similar thing about how Satan was doing the absolute same thing to other gods, saying, look at all this riches and all this kingdom. Go check that video out. A Wasp Bay is a different form of accounts of things, but that parallels this off the bat. Jesus, I don't like to say Jesus, I call him Yeshua. Jesus' wisdom path. Nazareth. He looked up at his disciples and said, blessed are you who are poor, because yours is God's reign. Blessed are you who are hungry, because you will be full. Blessed are you who mourn, because you'll be comforted. Blessed are you when they criticize you, harass you, and spread lies about you because of the human one. Rejoice and be glad, because your heavenly reward is great. For that's how they harassed the prophets before you. Love your enemies and pray for those who harass you. You'll become children of your provider, who makes the sun rise on those who do evil and those who do good, and sends rain on those who are just and those who are unjust. When someone slaps you on the cheek, offer the other one too. When someone sues you for your shirt, give them your coat too. When someone makes you go 1 mile, go an extra mile. Give to everyone who asks you, and when someone borrows your things, don't ask for them back. Treat people how you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, why should you be rewarded? Don't even toll collectors do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, why should you be rewarded? Don't people from other nations do that? Be merciful, just like your provider. Don't judge, and you won't be judged, because you'll be judged the way that you judge, and you'll be measured the way that you measure. Can someone who can't see guide another person who can't see? Won't they both fall into a pit? Our disciple isn't greater than their teacher. It's enough for the disciple to become like their teacher. Why do you see the speck that's in your brother's or sister's eye, but don't consider the beam that's in your own eye? How can you tell your brother or sister, let me get that speck out of your eye, when you don't see the beam that's in your eye? You hypocrite. First get the beam out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to get the speck out of your brother's or sister's eye. No good tree bears rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. Every tree is known by its own fruit. Are figs gathered from thorns, or grapes from thistles? The person who does good brings good things out of their good treasure, and the person who does evil brings evil things out of evil treasure, because one's mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. Why do you call me Master, Master, and don't do what I say? Everyone who hears my words and acts on them can be compared to someone building a house on bedrock. When the rain poured and the floods came and the winds blew and pounded that house, it didn't collapse because it was founded on bedrock. But everyone who hears my words and doesn't act on them is like someone who built a house on the sand. When the rain poured and the floods came and the winds blew and pounded that house, it collapsed immediately. How great was its fall? A lot of golden rule right there. A centurion's trust. And so when he had finished saying these things, he went to Capernaum. A centurion approached and begged him. My boy is sick, he said. I'll go heal him, Jesus said. Master, the centurion replied, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say the word and my boy will be healed. I'm also in a chain of command with soldiers under me. I tell one, go, and they go. I tell another, come, and they come. I tell my servant, do this, and they do it. Jesus was amazed when he heard this. He told his followers, I'm just telling you the truth. I haven't found such trust even in Israel. John and Jesus. When John heard all these things, he sent his disciples to ask him, quote, "Are you the coming one, or should we look for someone else?" End quote. "Go and tell John what you heard and seen." He replied, "Those who are blind regain their sight, have challenges of mobility walk, have leprosy are cured, are deaf hear, are dead are raised up, are poor have good news announced to them. Blessed is the one who isn't scandalized by me." When they had left, he started to talk to the crowds about John. "What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed shaken by the wind. Then what did you go out to see? A man wearing fancy cloths? Look, those who wear fancy cloths live in palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I'm telling you, and much more than a prophet, because it's written about him. Look, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare the path for you. Quote, I'm telling you that John is greater than anyone who's been born, but whoever is least in God's reigns is still greater than he, because John came to you, the toll collectors, and but him, end quote. To what then can I compare this generation? What's it like? It's like children sitting in the marketplace calling to each other. We played the flute for you, but you didn't dance. We mourned, but you didn't weep. Quote, John didn't come eating or drinking, and you say he's demonized. The human one has come eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and a drunk, a friend of toll collectors and outsiders. But wisdom is vindicated by her children, end quote. That's deep. Following Jesus. Someone told him, I'll follow you wherever you go. Foxes have holes and birds of the sky have nets. Jesus replied, but the human one has nowhere to rest his head. But someone else told him, Master, let me go and bury my father first. Follow me, he replied, and let the dead bury their own dead. He told his disciples, quote, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So ask the Lord of the harvest to send workers into the fields. Go. Look, I send you out like lambs among wolves. Don't carry a purse, bag, sandals, or staff. Don't greet anyone on the road. Whenever you enter a house, first say, peace to this house. If a peaceful person is there, let your blessing rest on them. But if not, take back your blessing, stay in the same house, eating and drinking whatever they give you, because the worker is worthy of their wages. Don't move around from house to house. If they welcome you in, whatever town you enter, eat whatever is set before you. Heal those who are sick, there, and tell them God's reign is at hand. But if they don't welcome you in, whatever town you enter, when you're leaving that town, shake the dust from your feet. I'm telling you that on that day, it will be better for Sodom than for the town. How awful for you, Ozim. How awful for you, Bethesda. If the great deeds done in your midst had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have changed a long time ago in sackcloth and ashes. But it will be better for the Tyre, and Sidon than for you in the judgment. And you, Capernaum, you don't think you'll be exalted to heaven, don't you? You'll fall down to the grave. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. God as provider. Then he said, thank you, provider, Lord of heaven and earth, for hiding these things from the wise and learned and revealing them to children. Yes, provider, this was what you wanted. My provider has given me everything. No one knows who the children is except the provider, or who the provider is except the children, and the one to whom the children wants to reveal. Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. I'm telling you that many prophets and rulers wanted to see what you see, but didn't see it, and to hear what you hear, but didn't hear it. When you pray, say, provider, we honor your holy name. Let your reign come. Give us our daily bread today. Forgive us our debts, because we too forgive everyone who's indebted to us. Don't put us in harm's way. I'm telling you, ask and you'll receive. Look and you shall find. Knock and it'll be opened for you, because everyone who asks receives. The one who looks finds. To one who knocks, it will be opened. Which of you would give your child a stone if they asked for bread? Or who would give them a snake if they asked for fish? So if you, evil as you are, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the heavenly provider give good things to those who ask? Overcoming demonic power. He was casting out a demon that couldn't speak. Now, when the demon came out, the person who couldn't speak started talking. The crowds were amazed, but some said he cast out demons with the power of Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. Knowing what they are thinking, he told them, every divided empire is devastated, and a divided house will fall. If the enemy is divided, how will its empire endure? But if Beelzebub gives me power to cast out demons, who gives you, your people, power to cast them out? So they prove you wrong. But if I cast out demons by the finger of God, and God's reign has come to you. Whoever isn't with me is against me, and whoever doesn't gather with me scatters. When the impure spirit leaves someone, it journeys through arid places looking for rest, but doesn't find it. Then it says, I'll return to the home I left. And when it comes back, it finds it swept and organized. Then it goes out and brings 7 other spirits that are even more evil, and they move in and live there. That person ends up even worse off than before. I actually have books on exorcising demons. Fun stuff. Very fun stuff. I'm doing this slowly so you can absorb. We've heard these words, at least some of you have heard these words before. but I'm reading them in a tone and in a way that Spirit wants me to do so. Remember, I work for the light. The coming judgment. Some demanded him to show a sign, but he said, "This is an evil generation. It demands a sign, but no sign will be provided except the sign of Jonah." As Jonah became a sign to the Ninevites, sorry guys, I'm not, get my words together. Ninevites. So the human one will be assigned to this generation. The queen of the south will rise up in the judgment with the generation and will condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom. And look, something greater than Solomon is here. The people of Nineveh will rise up in the judgment with this generation and will condemn it, because they changed in response to Jonah's announcement. And look, something greater than Jonah is here. No one lights a lamp and hides it, but puts it on a lamp's stead, and it enlightens everyone in the house. Your eye is the body's lamp. If your eye is focused, your whole body is full of light. I'm laughing because that is so true. We are luminescent. We just don't have the capacity to see it with our eyes. We are light. If you have an evil eye, your whole body is dark. So if the light within you is dark, how dark is it? How awful for you, Pharisees. You set aside 10% of your herbs and spice, but you ignore justice, mercy, and trust. You should have done these things without ignoring the others. How awful for you, Pharisees. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and decadence. Clean the inside of the cup, and its outside will be clean too. How awful for you, Pharisees. You love the place of honor at banquets, the front seat in the synagogues, and accolades in the marketplaces. How awful for you, because you're like unmarked graves that people walk on without knowing it. And how awful for you, lawyers. You load people with burdens that are hard to bear, but you yourselves won't even lift a finger to help them. How awful for you, lawyers. You shut people out of God's reign. You didn't enter and didn't let those enter who are trying to do so. How awful for you, because you build the tombs of the prophets whom your ancestors killed. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So wisdom said, I'll send prophets and sages. Some of them they'll kill and harass. So this generation will be guilty of the blood of all the prophets and shed from the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who died between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I'm telling you that this generation will be held responsible. Nothing is concealed that won't be revealed, nor hidden that won't be made known. Whatever I tell you in the dark, say in the light. And whatever you hear whispered in your ear, announce from the housetops. Don't be afraid of those who kill the body, but can't kill the soul. Instead, fear the one who can kill both the soul and the body in the burning trash heaps. Pause. That is happening right now. Right now. Right now. This is happening in our time of now. That's why it's biblical. I had that discussion with my aunt. She can't talk politics. She could talk Bible. Or she could talk Torah. This is happening now. We have a generation that we must eradicate. Bye-bye, evil shits. With love and light. You don't think this is not happening? Oh, hell yeah, it is. I correlate this lawyer part with my situation. I had called and written emails to a lot of lawyers. Yes, things cost money. I don't have them, but no one offered to figure out a solution to my problem by offering help. You have to pay a retainer. I don't have $500. I don't have $1,000. That's like 4 or 5 bills for me. And now with inflation, maybe 2 bills. I'd rather pay my bills. But if there's injustice going on, where are the lawyers? Where? And this is something that I'm going to repeat. I'm going to reread this part because this is something that is going to happen. It's not even here yet, but it's going to happen because it's slowly happening if you're picking up on things. Nothing is concealed that won't be revealed. What have they been hiding from us? Nor hidden that won't be made known. What have they been hiding from us? Whatever I tell you in the dark, say it in the light. Because the truth hurts. And whatever you hear whisper in your ear, announce from the rooftops. This is why I needed to read this book. I swear to you, I'm a messenger from spirit. Maybe I'm the prophet or a sage that has come upon this time to bring this information out to humanity. Why? What's happening in our world right now? What is happening? Bye-bye, evil. Bye-bye. I'm serious. Look at the news. Okay. For instance, there have been things that have been said 1 or 2 years ago that everybody thought was a tinfoil hat stance. No, that's not right. What are you talking about? That person on that channel said, no. We did our research. We have our sources. Come to find out, the people who spoke the truth were right. Who's being deceived? That's why I say shut the black box off. Oh, sorry, we have to retract that stuff now because we said it was wrong, but now it's right. But that the truth is coming out. It's hard. It sucks. But it's necessary. Can't hide forever. Your evil shit cannot hide forever. The truth about these is coming out. Sorry. And again, that's a free will choice. And I'm hoping that the majority of the people who did get them know that you're going to be fine. They were some bad batches. And most of the people will be fine. Again, I'm not here to scare you. If you feel that you need to go to the doctor just to make sure, I can say I'm with you 100% on that, just to make sure that you're in tip-top shape, because we need everybody on board, okay? I don't judge anybody for doing it. I send you love and light. For real. I'm not here to scare anybody, but you have to understand the agenda and the things that I know that I've researched. A lot of people didn't do their research. They allowed the television to dictate the fear and the lies. And the stories were coming out, and a lot of it looked true, and a lot of them weren't that true. And people went along with this narrative, and they will be put in judgment. A lot of harm has happened to everybody. It's not just me. Yeah, I can't pay my bills. I feed myself once a day. You know, this stuff sucks. But at the same time, when the truth comes out, you're going to be in a similar position to me in a different way. It's going to be okay. Put your trust in the situation, but don't get upset that you were lied to, because I'm warning you now. Send that evil love. They all played a role on God's stage, that we're all playing a role. Okay? We all play a role. Some lives were evil and some lives were saints. Some lives we are the victim, other lives we are the aggressor. Okay? That's just a cycle of how things go to grow our souls. Okay? The truth is going to come out. And I need people to understand this. When I'm reading these books, it goes all the way back then. Okay? These people who are born in this time were as deceived as we are now. Without technology, without mind control devices, without radio waves and things going on that we have that they didn't. It's still going on. Still, to this day. How do we fight this? By helping each other out, by unifying as one human race, not bound by countries and cultures. It's beautiful to have, and all should be accepted. Everybody is a child of God, and everybody should start treating each other like that, no matter what religion, faith, practice you follow. As long as it's for light, nature, love, it doesn't matter. Native Americans know of the Creator. The Aboriginals know there's a Creator. The ETs, whether it's beyond the ice wall or up in another dimension, know there's a Creator. It's all one and the same. Okay? People call it different names. It doesn't matter, as long as you are doing the right thing as a good person going out in the world. That's all that matters. And people need to stop with the if you don't follow Jesus, you're going to burn. No, that's not what needs to happen. That's like what my family said to me. Okay? That's what my family has said to me. And I'm sorry I'm going off on a rant because this is really good. but it needs to be said. This is from I'm just a messenger. Okay. I'm trying to show the world that a non-religious person still knows of Creator and still understands the words of Jesus Christ, Yeshua, the Son, the Eternal, the fourth density being of love and compassion. Why? Because that's the consciousness that we all need to obtain. Whether you want to look at the Law of One, the Urantia book, a Waspe, or any of the other gospels, it doesn't matter. It's the consciousness in the words that we're being taught is the Law of One. It is the Law of One. One's more on a metaphysical wavelength of writing, more religious. Same thing, different wording, but the same thing. The truth is going to come out. And for those of you who are still allowing the television to dictate to you, I'm trying to help you ease a big, huge blow that is incoming. And it's starting to flow. It's starting to come out each and every day. Something new comes out that is devastating. No, that's not true. The one who sniffs Parmesan cheese out of a rug, is that normal? Smokes a crack pipe and has children on a desktop. Well, that's gonna come out. And then you're gonna want to know why the justices that they're picking are for a reason. Because somebody in those circles did some naughty things to people. The children of God. And that is the worst. It made me cry when I first learned about that. And let me tell you what, it's not for the soft stomach at all. And I don't know how much they're going to reveal. I needed to get that out of the way. Because we are living in biblical times. And we need to understand these words are super important. This is the consciousness that we all need to raise to. This is the standards of thinking that we all need to live by. And the sad part of it is people still do read this stuff and will debate it up and down, but don't live by it. Live by these examples, the golden rule. You can't hate other people if you're living by those rules. You will do acts of good for other people because that's within your heart to do so. And that is what you're giving to people, is your energy, your love, and your light. People demonize people like me. But what was Jesus? Nothing but a prophet. What was Daniel and Isaiah? Prophets. Where do they get their information from? The same place I'm getting mine. And I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who could channel, a lot of people who could read. It's the intention of what you're doing that makes it good or bad. It's the source of where you grow your energy from. If you are doing evil, wicked deals, you're attracting the evil energy. If you're in love and light and you stay in that frequency and you raise your frequency and you're doing it out of love for humanity and for people and for everybody, you're working with source. So when I do oracle cards, they're coming from source. It's just a tool. Nothing more. It's to help people along their route. It's the energy that I pick up from others. Back to the book. I'm sorry, I can't. Priorities. Don't 5 sparrows cost 2 pennies? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground without your provider's permission. Even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid, because you are more valuable than many sparrows. It's beautiful. Everyone who publicly acknowledges me, the human one will acknowledge in front of the angels. But whoever publicly denies me will be denied in front of the angels. Whoever speaks out against the human one will be forgiven. But whoever speaks out against the Holy Spirit won't be forgiven. When they bring you before the synagogues, don't worry about how or what you should say, because the Holy Spirit will teach you at that time what you should say. Don't store treasures for yourself here on earth, where moth and rust destroy and robbers break in and steal. Instead, store treasures for yourself in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where robbers don't break in or steal. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be too. So I'm telling you not to worry about your life, about what you'll eat, or about your body, what you'll wear. Isn't life more than food and the body more than clothes? Think about how the ravens don't sow, reap, or gather in barns, yet God feeds them. Aren't you more valuable than the birds? Which of you can grow any taller by worrying? And why worry about clothes? Look at how the lilies grow. They don't work or spin. Yet I'm telling you that even Solomon in all his glory wasn't dressed like one of these. But if God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and is thrown into the oven tomorrow, won't God clothe you even more? You will have little trust. So don't worry, don't ask. What are we going to eat? Or what are we going to drink? Or what are we going to wear? People from other nations look for these things, but your provider knows that you need all of them. Instead, look for God's reign, and all things will be given to you. But know this, if the master of the house had known at what time the robber was coming, he wouldn't have let his house be broken into. You too should be ready, because the human one is coming when you don't expect it. Then who is the trustworthy and wise servant who was entrusted by their master to hand out rations to the household at the right time? Blessed is that servant whose master finds them doing so when he comes. I'm telling you the truth. He'll put them in charge of all that he owns. But if that servant says in their heart, my master is late, and starts to beat the other servants and to eat and drink with those who are addicted to alcohol, the master, that servant, will come when they don't expect it, at a time that they don't know, and will rip them to shreds and throw them out with those who are untrustworthy. I came to cast fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. Do you think that I came to bring peace on earth? I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, because I've come to pit son against father, daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. He told them, when it is evening, you say, there will be good weather because the sky is red. In the morning, there'll be wintry weather today because the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky. Why don't you know how to interpret the time? When you're going with your adversity, do your best to settle the case on the way there, or else your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and the officer may throw you into prison. I'm telling you that you won't get out of there until you paid the very last penny. Interesting. Entering God's reign. What is God's reign like? And to what should I compare it? It can be compared to a mustard seed, which someone sowed in their garden. It grew and became a tree, and the birds of the sky nested in its branches. And again, to what should I compare God's reign? It can be compared to the yeast which a woman hid in 50 pounds of flour until it was all fermented. Enter through the narrow door, because many will try to enter, though only a few will succeed. When the master of the house gets up and locks the door, you'll be standing outside and knocking on it. Master, open up for us, you'll say. But he'll reply, I don't know you. Then you'll start to say, we ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets. But he'll say, I don't know you. Go away, you criminals. Many will come from the east and west and dine with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in God's reign. But you'll be thrown out into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and grinding of teeth. Those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stone those who are sent to her. How often I would have gathered your children together, like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you wouldn't let me in. Look, your house is left abandoned. I am telling you that you won't see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Whoever exalts themselves will be humbled, and whoever humbles themselves will be exalted. Someone planning a great dinner invited many guests. When the dinner was ready, they sent their servant to tell the invited guests, come because it's ready now. One excused himself because of his farm. Another excused himself because of his business. The servant went back and told their master all this. Then the master of the house got mad and told the servants, go out to the highway and urge people to come in so that my house may be filled. Whoever doesn't disregard father and mother can't be my disciple, and whoever doesn't disregard son and daughter can't be my disciple. Whoever doesn't carry their own cross and follow me can't be my disciple. Whoever tries to find their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Salt is good, but if it's lost its flavor, how can you get it back? It's no good for the soil or the manure pile. It's thrown away. No one can follow two masters, because they'll either hate one and love the other, or they'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. The Torah and the prophets were announced until John. Since then, God's reign has been violated. and the violent plunder it. But it's easier for heaven and earth to despair than for one smallest letter or one tiny pen stroke to drop out of the Torah. Everyone who divorces his wife, remarries, is unfaithful to her, and whoever marries someone who's divorced is unfaithful too. There's no way that people won't be tripped up, but how awful it will be for anyone who caused it. It'd be better for them if a millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea, than for them to trip up one of those little ones. Which of you, if you had 100 sheep and lost one of them, would leave the 99 in the hills and go after the one that got lost? When they find it, I'm telling you that they'll rejoice over it more than the 99 that didn't wander off. Or that woman with 10 silver coins, if she loses one, wouldn't light a lamp, sweep the house, look everywhere until she found it? When she finds it, she calls together her friends and neighbors. Rejoice with me, she says, because I found the coin that I lost. In the same way, I'm telling you, the angels rejoice over the one wrongdoer who changes. If your brother or sister offends you, correct them. If they change, forgive them. Even if they offended you 7 times a day, then forgive them 7 times. If you had trust as big as mustard seed, you could tell this mulberry tree, be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. The coming of God's reign. He was asked when God's reign would come. The coming of God's reign couldn't be observed, he replied. Nor will they say, look over here or look over there, because God's reign is among you. You. If they tell you, look, he's in the desert, don't go out, or look, he's inside, don't follow, because as the lightning flashes in the east and is seen in the west, so will the human one be in his day. Where there's a corpse, there the vultures will gather. As it was in the day of Noah, so it will be in the day of the human one. In those days they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and swept all of them away. That's what it will be like on the day the human one is revealed. I'm telling you, there'll be 2 men in the field. One will be taken and the other will be left. There'll be 2 women grinding at the mill. One will be taken and the other will be left. A certain person went on a trip. He called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. Do business with this until I return, he told them. After a long time, the master of those servants returned to settle accounts with them. The first one came and said, Master, your mina has made 10 more minas. He said, well done, good servant. Since you've been trustworthy with a little, I'll put you in charge of much. The second came and said, Master, your mina has made 5 minas. He said, well done, good servant. Since you've been trustworthy with a little, I'll put you in charge of much. The other came and said, Master, I know you're a strict man, reaping where you didn't sow, and gather where you didn't scatter. I went out and hid your mina in the ground. Look, here's what belongs to you. He said, you evil servant, you knew that I reap what I didn't sow and gathered where I didn't scatter. So why didn't you invest my money with the bankers? Then, when I return, I would have gotten it back with interest. So take the mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas, because everyone who has will be given more, but whoever doesn't have will lose even that little they do have. You who follow me will sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Its leaders is very plausible, and it fits well with what we know of the tone of Jesus' own mission. Greed, interest, the beginnings of indebted enslavement. The criterion of multiple independent attestation. This criterion hinges on the literacy relationships, or more precisely, the lack thereof, between the Gospels as described in the introduction. The basic idea is that Jesus' sayings and stories about Jesus are more likely to be historically accurate if multiple texts describe those sayings and stories independently of one another. It is not just that a saying or story needs to be recorded by several sources. If a saying or story is copied by one author from another, for example, this criterion doesn't apply. The traditions needed to be not only widely attested, but widely attested by independent sources, like court trial witnesses who haven't had the opportunity to compare notes. Sorry, guys. For example, the story of Jesus calming a storm is described by 3 different Gospels in Matthew 8:23 through 27, Mark 4:35 through 41, and Luke 8:22 through 25. However, in comparing the 3 stories, it's easy to notice that the authors of Matthew and Luke both copied the story from Mark. The story has multiple attestation, but not multiple independent attestation. It really comes from only a single known source, the Gospel of Mark. The fact that a story, like the calming of the storm, doesn't pass this criterion doesn't automatically mean that it isn't historical. It can't prove a negative. The point rather is that this criterion can provide a plausible argument for an event having actually happened. To cite a positive example, many different independent sources provided evidence that Jesus really did exist. The historical existence of Jesus is affirmed by the Apostle Paul, the Jewish historian Josephus, and Gospels like the 17th letter of the alphabet, Mark, Thomas, and other writings independent of one another. Another positive example is the tradition that John the Baptizer's mission paved the way for the Jesus mission. This tradition is independently attested by the 17th letter of the alphabet, Mark and John. This example actually meets 2 of the criteria for historical accuracy, as it also met the criterion of coherence described above. Because of this, Quelle's description of the origins of Jesus' ministry appears plausible. A final example is relevant to the present study, the question of whether or not Jesus was literate. Surprising as it may seem at first blush, there is no unambiguous evidence that Jesus knew how to read or write. 2 stories in the New Testament Gospels suggest otherwise, but neither one passes this or any other criterion of historical reliability. The first is John 8:6, which describes Jesus writing something on the ground with his finger. Not only is the story not attested elsewhere, the entire passage is missing from the earliest version of John and is therefore likely a much later addition. The second is Luke 4:16 FF, when Jesus is said to have read from the scroll of Isaiah in a synagogue in Nazareth. This passage too is unique. No other text describes Jesus reading from a scroll. In fact, since the vast majority of peasant Galileans were illiterate, it's highly likely that Jesus was illiterate too, as were all his disciples. The books of Acts actually says as much when it describes Peter and John as illiterate agrammatoli in Acts 4:13. Undoubtedly, Jesus knew large portions of Israel's scriptures by heart, but his lack of formal education is often cited as a significant reason that Jesus' audience were so astonished at how knowledgeable he was despite his ignoramus origins. Here's Matthew's version of the same story with the author of Luke, copied from Mark, showing how Luke alone edited Mark to add detail about Jesus reading a scroll. Coming into his own country, he taught them in their synagogue. They were amazed. Where did this man get such wisdom and mighty deeds? They asked. Isn't that the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother known as Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all of his sisters around? Then where did this man get all this things? They were scandalized by him. John recounts the same type of reaction. The authorities were amazed. How can this uneducated man be so articulate? Again, the criterion of multiple independent attestation can't prove a negative. So just because John 8:6 and Luke 4:16 FF don't pass the criterion doesn't automatically mean that Jesus couldn't read or write. However, in the absence of compelling evidence that he did have such a formal education, it's more plausible to conclude that Jesus, like other people in his class, that is carpenters, not scribes, simply was not literate. What would easily explain why this immensely influential teacher didn't leave behind any writings of his own, and why traditions about teachings and activities weren't committed to ink and papyrus until years later. How much easier it would be to learn about the historical Jesus if he had been able to write an autobiography or a personal account of his own teachings? Yes. We wouldn't have these arguments. The criterion and dissimilarity. This criterion, also known as the criterion and embarrassment, works on a very different principle than the criterion of multiple independent attestation. The basic idea is that traditions which don't support the theological agendas or beliefs of gospel authors are more likely to be accurate, since the authors are less likely to have simply made them up. Of course, this criterion doesn't automatically imply that a tradition consistent with an author's agenda should be considered suspect. After all, we should expect continuity between historical tradition and the writers who've been influenced by it. What it does mean, however, is that if Jesus saying a story or about Jesus could be an occasion for embarrassment to a gospel author, it's more likely to have an actual historical basis. One permanent example has been shown to pass both the criterion of multiple independent attestation and the criterion of dissimilarity. The fact that Jesus was popular, understood a prophet, N.T. Wright explains at length at this point. The early church is highly unlikely to have invented the many sayings, isolated but telling, scattered throughout the Gospels, which called Jesus a prophet. Several of them are on his own lips. By the time the Gospels were written, the church had come to believe that Jesus was much more than a prophet. It might well have seemed risky theologically to refer to him in this way. It might have appeared that he was simply being put on a level with all the other prophets. It is therefore extremely probable that these sayings represent thoroughly authentic tradition. We are here historically speaking on certain ground. The question of just what type of leader Jesus was historically has a different bearing on how we should evaluate the meaning of significance of Quelle. Was Jesus a rabbi or a prophet? Using a different type of methodology, the deep, profound wisdom teacher Cynthia Bourgeois, sorry, I'm butchering that French last name, argues convincingly that Jesus was a wisdom teacher. After describing him in this way, however, she goes on to set the category against the category of Jesus as prophet. Nor was he a prophet in the usual sense of the term, a messenger sent to the people of Israel to warn them of impending political catastrophe in an attempt to redirect their hearts to God. Jesus was not interested in the political fate of Israel. But the categories of sage and prophet need not be mutably exclusive. For example, in his book, cited earlier, Wright warns against playing off the picture of Jesus as sage, a teacher of subversive wisdom, against the emphasis going on to argue for Jesus the sage as a subset of Jesus the prophet. However, once Wright subsumes Jesus as wisdom teacher under the category of prophet, in actual practice, the former seems conventionally to drop out of sight. Might the truth actually be the other way around? If the reconstructed 17th letter of the alphabet gospel in its current form is any indication, it seems rather likely that Jesus' prophetic condemnation of social injustice could very well have been grounded in his subversive and countercultural wisdom teaching. Arland D. Jacobson states the idea substantially in his introduction to Quelle in the Complete Gospels. Jesus appears in Quelle as a wise teacher and prophet. According to Quelle 11:49, wisdom sent prophets to Israel. This means that the 17th letter of the alphabet, we have a combination of the wisdom and prophetic traditions, though this was not really new. But as a way of identifying Jesus' role, it does make Quelle different from the canonical Gospels. Interestingly, both categories, Jesus as a teacher of wisdom and Jesus as a social prophet, appear evenly blended in the final passage of Jesus' first sermon in Quelle. Why do you call me master, master, and do not do what I say? Everyone who hears my words and acts on them can be compared to someone building a house on bedrock. When the rain poured and the floods came and the winds blew and pounded that house, it didn't collapse because it was founded on the bedrock. But everyone who hears my words and doesn't act on them is like someone who built a house on the sand. When the rain poured and the floods came and the winds blew and pounded that house, it collapsed immediately. How great was its fall? The idea of Jesus as a prophet of wisdom, in short, both a popular and rural sage and a prophetic witness against social injustice, not only satisfies critical tests of historical reliability, but also provides a plausible interceptive framework for the earliest gospel of them all, Quelle. So I'm going to leave that there. We're going to pick up on the next chapter. Again, short, very short read. I almost blew through the book. But I needed to rant, and I'm sorry if that offends anybody. Again, I'm just a messenger from above. And a lot of things are coming our way that we can't necessarily do for the whole, but you do for what your community and the people that you seek out need. If we take anything away from what I've been reading, is that we need to stop judging others and accept them for who they are, as long as they're authentic and they're walking in the light. There are some people who are lost, who need a lot of guidance, and be that person to guide them. And if you can't guide them, I'm sure you have resources to help them and bring them to where they need to be. I don't know everything, but when a lot of people ask me on spiritual matters, if I can't answer the questions, I send them off with books that I feel might help them get those answers done and those questions answered. We are all puzzle pieces to a greater puzzle, and we all fit a piece in this greater picture of life. All of us hold a piece to a puzzle that we all have to come in on to make the bigger picture. All of us. What piece are you holding, and how can you contribute to that bigger picture? And this is what we're being asked to do now. Our world is collapsing around us. How do we make the new world better? How do we raise our consciousness up out of this evil, manipulative, diluted world that has been nothing but indoctrination and enslavement? How do we rise above all of this? How can we all come together, no matter where you are, and grow? Because like in the movie with those ants, there's only a few up there, and there's many of us. Who wins at the end? The ones that are aware and move forward. The ones who wake up everybody else to the truth and ushers everybody along together. No one's left behind. Unless they choose to be. So I think this book is very important. It had its time and place and divine timing of my reading it now. And again, it doesn't mean if you're a spiritual person reading religious words, it doesn't take away from anything, because these concepts should be done. It doesn't matter who said them. At the end of the day, it could be Yeshua, it could be the guy down the street. The point is love and light. The point is do it. There are plenty of people who've never read anything about Jesus, who's never heard anything about Yeshua. They walk their own path, but all these concepts are instilled in them in different ways. It doesn't matter as long as you do them. We have to get off the religious train for a second and realize the Native Americans have, I'm sure they know about Jesus, but they still use these morals and these ways of life. It's the same thing. Same. Golden rule is applied everywhere. All different faiths. So we really need to come together and be better and learn and teach this to our children. We're not going to get anywhere if we hide and we're all greedy and we sit in gluttony and everything is about me, selfish. Yes, you should take care of yourself. You cannot help others if your cup isn't full. That's for sure. But when you make it all about yourself and not about others, really think again and go through what you need to do for others and yourself. What can you do to contribute? What puzzle piece can you put in? We all have a piece. We need to make a bigger picture. Now think about which one you have and how that picture is going to be made. And with that, I'll see you on the next one. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Again, I'm not here to offend anybody with my ranting. It's just what needs to be heard, and the right people will hear it and resonate with it. But I hope you got something out of that. I know I did. And I'm reading this in the time of now, not what is. This is now, this is happening now, and this is where we need to go. Okay? From my perspective, my opinion, this is where I think we all need to like focus and hone in on. With that, sending each and every one of you love and light. Praying for all of you for this week. Enjoy. Be safe out there. And what can you do to help another person this week? Think about it. I'll see you on the next time, and we'll finish this off. Bye, guys.